Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes. To keep in touch with us, use our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, which are all at Q and Review. That's CUEANDREVIEW, or get in touch via information@qandreview.com. That's information@CUEANDREVIEW.com. Please like and share our podcasts and give us any constructive feedback.
The Herald, Wednesday the 4th of May 2022 News. Councils on brink of extinction due to Holyrood's power grab, union warns. This article is by Hannah Roger. Councils will be left responsible for only bins and bodies if the Scottish Government continues centralising services, the head of Scotland's largest local authority trade union has warned. Speaking ahead of the elections tomorrow, Tracy Dolling, Scottish Secretary of Unison, said that those successfully elected must not act as managers of decline or mouthpieces for Holyrood, and instead stand up for local services and the staff who deliver them. Ms Darling said there was a real risk that councils could become essentially extinct in their current form in the next decade if the government continues with its centralisation plans, such as the National Care Service. She said, "It's been my fear for the last 10 years and will continue to be my fear for the coming 10 years over what is the nature of locally delivered and locally accountable services in our communities. I've used this expression over the years, bins and bodies. We will have refuse collection and we will have burials and graveyards run by councils and very little else." Speaking exclusively to the Herald, Ms Darling said there was a huge centralised agenda from the Scottish Government and has been for some time, pointing to examples such as Police Scotland and the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, which were formed in 2013 from multiple regional bodies. She added, "The latest iteration of this agenda is the National Care Service, and we've had John Swinney over the years talking about a National Education Service. These are local services delivered to local people by local employees, and they are held to account by locally elected councillors. If we continue with this and we continue with the level of cuts to a whole range of services and a mantra that somehow private can do things better or cheaper, what is going to be left in terms of local service delivery?" Ms Darling, who became the trade union's first female Scottish leader in history in March, said there was a need for councillors to be able to be held accountable for the services which their constituents expect to receive where they live. However, if vital facilities and services were centralised or handed over to arm's-length bodies, the ability to hold those to account becomes diminished, as responsibility for them would no longer be held by councils. Ms Darling continued, "This is about councillors standing up, not just, for issues such as dog fouling, perhaps in their wards, or the local library or the swimming pool, but about the future of local government in Scotland. We have a very, very proud and rich tradition of councils being democratically elected and accountable to the people, with surgeries on your doorstep. You can go and chap a door and say, 'I'm not happy about X, Y and Z.' These are services that as a member of a community I would expect to find. A school to put my kid into, a home carer to provide care for, an ageing relative, as well as, my bins being lifted. Where do you go with that if that doesn't exist any longer and there's not that level of accountability in your community?" The union chief, who represents the largest number of local authority workers in Scotland, said those who are successfully elected must fight for their councils in their areas and not manage decline of budgets and services, which has been the case across the country for many years. Budgets for councils have dwindled, with many being forced to sell off key assets, privatise services or reduce the frequency of others in order to manage. Ms Darling explained that councillors who succeed tomorrow should have a pride in the cities and communities that they are there to represent. She added, "This is not necessarily about party politics. This is about if you are elected, you are accountable, and we must warn them to be as accountable as they possibly can. My fear is, with the current trajectory, there won't be services there to deliver, and they will have no oversight. When you place things into arm's length organisations or put in some kind of board in some way, as we've seen with police and fire services, these big intrinsic parts of our society, I just think we are seeing a complete dilution of that. I want to know that I can place a cross on a ballot paper for somebody who understands local democracy, understands local services, and understands the need to deliver for the people that they represent. Council elections historically have a low turnout, with the union chief urging voters to turn up and cast their ballots tomorrow. In 2012, just 39% of people voted in the local elections, with the lowest rate 34% in Aberdeen. In 2017, total turnout had increased to 47%, thought to be linked to the fact that the vote was taking place around the same time as the UK general election. She explained the turnout rates in local elections are not known to be great, and I'm not anticipating there will be a huge change of heart tomorrow in terms of leaving your house or filling out the postal ballot paper. If you drive through any section of our communities at the moment, there's nothing on the lampposts, there's no posters in the windows. There does not seem to be a huge level of engagement around all of this, and I think we will see an increasingly diminishing turnout, and I think that's because people are not sure anymore of what's left to vote for. So it's critically important that people leave their houses on Thursday, either to post the ballot paper or to place the cross in the box in a polling station, and be absolutely clear that they are participating in a process that's to allow those who are elected, regardless of the political party, to stand up for their communities and to deliver quality public services by local people directly employed by local councils. The Scottish Government said local authorities will always play a crucial role in Scotland, and the Scottish Government looks forward to continuing our work with them across areas ranging from education to social care, housing, roads and transport. As we have previously said, we want to devolve power to more local levels. That's why we jointly launched the Local Governance Review with COSLA to ensure Scotland's diverse communities in different places have greater control and influence over decisions that affect them most. This article is by Hannah Roger. The Herald, Wednesday the 4th of May 2022, News. New poll points to election setback for Douglas Ross and Scottish Tories. This article is by Tom Gordon. A new poll suggests Douglas Ross is set to lead the Scottish Tories backwards in tomorrow's local elections as Labour moves into second place. On Monday, Mr Ross told the Herald he expected to come second behind the SNP, despite controversy over Boris Johnson, Partygate and the cost of living crisis. "I'm really confident that we will maintain second place and we will have a really good result," he said. However, a Savanta Comrie survey for the Scotsman about Holyrood voting intentions found Tory support crumbling as Scottish Labour made gains under Anna Sarwar. If the results are mirrored in Thursday's council election, which is difficult to predict because of the STV voting system, it would be a major blow to Mr Ross. The Moray MP is facing personal criticism over his off-on support for Mr Johnson being a factor in the contest. After calling for him to quit in January after the Partygate scandal made his position untenable, Mr Ross said in March the PM should stay put because of the war in Ukraine. The new poll found 56% of Scots thought his U-turn was wrong, including 21% of Tory voters, with 39% of Scots saying this made them feel worse about him as a leader, and 37% said it made them less likely to vote for the Scottish Conservatives. However, 69% of Tory voters said his U-turn made no difference to their voting intentions. On Holyrood voting intention, the poll found 46% of Scots would vote for the SNP in their constituency, compared to 25% support for Labour and just 18% backing the Tories. The 7-point gap is Labour's biggest lead over the Tories in Scotland since late 2015. In a sign voters are using their Holyrood votes more creatively, the SNP were much weaker on the regional list vote, with support down to 31%. The Greens appear to be benefiting, with their list support at a record 14%. The Liberal Democrats are on 10% on the list and 7% in the constituencies. Alex Salmond's Alaba Party were at 3% support on the list. On support for independence, the poll found 49% of decided voters backing yes and 51% backing no. At the 2017 council election, the Scottish Tories had their best result in 35 years, gaining 161 councillors to reach 276, as their share of the first preference votes rose from 13.3% to 25.3%. Labour lost 132 of its councillors, sinking to 262 as its vote share fell from 31.4% to 20.2%. Scottish Labour hopes to come second on vote share, but fears the vagaries of the preferential voting system could still leave them third on councillor numbers. Chris Hopkins, Associate Director at Savanta Comrie, said Labour's lead was likely due to the ongoing scandals engulfing the Conservative Party, rather than a Sarwarald revival. He said Labour's large lead over the Conservatives in second place of both the constituency and list Holyrood VIS are certainly eye-catching, but as with almost everything related to Labour at the moment, it feels more like a lead more to do with the fortunes of the Conservatives than anything Labour are doing especially well. The Conservatives' Westminster fortunes have taken a battering since Partygate, but it appears that the cost of living crisis has turned Scottish voters away from the party, and with there unlikely to be any remedy to many voters' concerns about the affordability of basic items needed to live on the horizon, it's possible things could get worse for the Conservatives before they get better, including on Thursday in the local elections. Savanta Comrie interviewed 1,010 Scottish adults online between April the 26th and May the 3rd. This article is by Tom Gordon.
Herald Scotland recorded on Wednesday, 4th of May 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Ewan McGregor, Train Spotting, Why Class Matters in the Arts, by Mark Eady. For many years I had a thing about Train Spotting. It annoyed me, but not for the reasons you might expect. Its graphic heroin scenes, lurid squalor and euphoric nihilism turned a grim tale about Edinburgh's drug epidemic into a cinematic classic, not to mention a 90s pop culture icon. And the soundtrack is superb, I get it. So what was it that bothered me? The truth, they chose a posh lad for the lead role. Now this is not a personal attack on Ewan McGregor, honest, and I don't feel that way now. He's a fine actor and he did a fantastic job. But as with so many actors in the profession today, having a privately educated middle-class background has equipped the Benedicts, Eddies, Tildas, Emilys and Olivias with an instinctive understanding of the values needed to mix and thrive within the metropolitan art set, as well as the language tricks, financial safety net and the confidence to pull it off. It also helps if you have family connections. Just 7% of the UK population are educated privately, while according to a 2016 study by the London School of Economics and Goldsmiths University of London, 73% of performers are described as middle class. So bravo to Line of Duty star Vicky McClure and her fiancé Johnny Owen for launching the production company BYO, Build Your Own Films, with its mission statement to give those from less privileged homes an opportunity and, where possible, hiring local writers, cast and crew. McClure, the daughter of a joiner and a hairdresser, knows the pain of having a dream crushed, having had to turn down a place at a top London acting school because her parents couldn't afford the fees. It makes her success all the more remarkable. Do I sound as if I have a large working class chip on my shoulder about this? I admit it, I probably do. Years ago I dabbled in amateur dramatics, and sure, there were lots of wobbly sets and fake twirled moustaches, but it was also serious stuff. To perform in front of a paying audience, a certain level of professionalism was expected. Mess up on stage and you knew about it, and more importantly, so did those watching. Putting on a show costs money, and it's bums and seats that pays the bills. Trust and teamwork are everything, and of course talent helps. I met many people who were brilliant, and could have gone on to bigger and better things had circumstances allowed. Indeed, I even harboured hopes of pursuing a career in the industry myself. However, when the dates came round for my auditions in London, my bottle crashed and reality kicked me in the teeth. I could neither afford it, nor had the support network. If I'm honest, I'd never have got through even if I had gone for it. Having watched a video of myself attempting a Yorkshire accent in Billy Liar at the 1999 Edinburgh Festival, I'm amazed there wasn't a stampede for the exit doors. But those with talent must be allowed to rise to the top without the risk of being strangled by an old school tie. It can and does happen despite the overwhelming odds. Just look at Alan Cumming, Kelly MacDonald, Brian Cox, and let's not forget Big Tam and the Big Yin. But there are exceptions to the rule. Indeed, McClure's excellent co-star Martin Compston could easily have been lost to us had he not been plucked out of obscurity by Ken Loach all those years ago. He shines with the brightest of stars. If only it happened more often. Now we're sucking diesel. Our columns are a platform for writers to express their opinions. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Herald. By Mark Eady.
From the Herald Scotland, Thursday the 5th of March 2022, from the news section, ScotRail staff threatened to boycott route due to brawling teenagers. By Ellie Forbes. ScotRail staff threatened to boycott troubled routes plagued by unruly passengers after a ticket examiner was left traumatised trying to eject brawling teens from a train. The train crew member was confronted by a gang of youths hitting a younger boy with a bottle and pouring alcohol over him on a Glasgow service on Sunday. She contacted the British Transport Police but was told that officers had been diverted to deal with a trespasser on another line and did not arrive until after it was over. The Rail, Maritime and Transport Union says staff would boycott trouble spots if action was not taken. The ticket examiner says she feels her safety has been jeopardised every day at work and that it's taking its toll on her mental and physical health. She said, "I was aware that the notorious young team, about 15 to 20 young teenage boys, boarded the service at Alexandria. One of them, who was wearing a light green hoodie and carrying a bottle of alcohol, headed towards 3 young boys and challenged one of them, then proceeded to hit one of them with his bottle and poured the alcohol all over him. By this point, the rest of the young team were all bundled into that compact area and were going nuts. 2 of them were physically attacking one of the boys. The other 2 innocent boys just sat in shock, looking terrified as their pal got beaten up. I shouted to get them off the train and no one was listening. When we got to Renton, as I was physically removing some of the young team off the train, they were trying to push past me to get back on. However, I was stood firm in the doorway and had to shout to the driver to shut the door. The boys were continuing to shout abuse and trying to figure out a way to get back on. Luckily, the doors closed and we got away. The young boy who suffered the attack was too scared to report anything, but what I witnessed was a horrific ordeal. I feel traumatised at what I have witnessed, and I feel physically sick. My blood pressure was sky high. Every day I come to work, I feel my safety has been jeopardised. This is taking its toll on my mental and physical health. I'm not happy with their BTP response. British Transport Police turned up, took a brief statement, and advised me they had been en route to my incident, but were told to turn around and go to another incident at Hillington involving a trespasser. I feel that some unknown trespasser took priority over my own safety and that of paying customers. She said she had to end her shift early. Because of the incident, I would not be returning to duty until further notice. RMT Scotland organiser, Mick Hogg, said there should be more police patrols on trains and at least 2 ticket examiners in every service, rather than the current single one. He said, if the situation does not get fixed, RMT and ASLEF will instruct their members not to run trains into the affected hotspots or routes until staff can go to work and be safe. Our railway is becoming a magnet for antisocial behaviour, and nothing is getting done about it. It's just a matter of time before there is a fatality. Chief Superintendent Jill Murray, BTP Scotland Commander, has already warned of an emerging threat of youth and antisocial behaviour on trains and buses. In March, Transport Minister Jenny Gilruth agreed to consider an RMT call for a new law to ban disruptive passengers from ScotRail, like they can be from football grounds. A BTP spokesperson said, "Through partnership working with ScotRail and Police Scotland, we're working tirelessly to deter criminality and antisocial behaviour on the railway network, and we have been increasing patrols in the Balloch line using targeted operations to deter offending. Where offences involving youth take place, we regularly engage with schools and campus officers to identify those responsible and deal with them accordingly. We will take action as the railway needs to be a safe place for everyone using it." ScotRail Security and Crime Manager Stephen Elliott said, "The safety of our customers and employees is our number one priority. Antisocial behaviour, whether that's physical violence, verbal abuse, or any other form, is completely unacceptable. Everyone has the right to go about their day in peace, so we will continue to work with the authorities to ensure that anyone responsible for antisocial behaviour is brought to justice." And that was a report by Ellie Forbes.
Recorded from the Herald on the 5th of May 2022, from the sports section. Brendan Rodgers reveals hospital scare before taking Celtic job due to Liverpool sacking stresses, by Aidan Smith. Brendan Rodgers has revealed he was rushed into hospital just months before becoming Celtic manager due to the stresses of his stint at Liverpool. The former Parkhead boss was axed at Anfield in October 2015 after a string of poor results culminated in a 1-1 Merseyside derby draw against Everton. Just months later, in the summer of 2016, Rodgers was appointed Celtic manager, and the 49-year-old has opened up in a whirlwind period in his career. He told the coach's view, "I had plenty of people tell me not to do it. I had options to go to the Premier League, I had an option to go to China to make an awful lot of money. But I was a Celtic supporter. I knew the size of the club, I knew the expectations, I knew the fan base. I knew there was an opportunity to play Champions League football. Most of all, I knew there was an opportunity to win. I was very fortunate really because I knew Celtic was the place for me. I had left Liverpool in October. It was early in the season, only 8 league games in. I took the call on Sunday evening after the Merseyside derby. The owners felt they needed to make a change. I accepted the decision, and from that point I was no longer the Liverpool manager. On Monday I was offered another job, but I'd always felt that I wanted to go in where I could at the beginning of a season. On top of that, I needed the recovery, needed to get away. Liverpool had been an emotional rollercoaster. It's such a huge club, one of the great clubs of the world. Even the good days are difficult. I enjoyed every single minute of it, but it had taken a toll. I wanted to go away and reflect on my time at Liverpool, but also to regain 2 elements that I believe are absolutely vital to any manager: energy and happiness. No matter what you do in life, I feel that you need both, but in particular for a football manager, and for me at that time, they were crucial. If you are energised and happy, you can do your job much better. It was a case of turning the engine off football for a little while, spending some time with my kids, doing some travelling with my wife, and then tapping back into football in the new year. I went to Spain for a week, then I came back and flew to Dubai. Within a couple of days in Dubai, I was rushed into hospital. I went through all the tests. It was felt that I was having some issues internally, but then they got into the process of what had happened with work with my life. They pieced it all together, and it was simply a case of my body being so tense, so tight, from all that had happened in finishing my time at Liverpool. It reminded me of the pressures you experience and the expectations you carry as a manager, especially at the bigger clubs. It reinforced for me that it was time to find a calmness, to re-energise and make sure I was genuinely ready for the next challenge. It wasn't about the next club though, it was about the right club. What is vitally important in your next job, I believe, is that you win, and that you win in the best way you can. I saw that in Celtic. I saw the opportunity to win and a chance to bring my ideas into another iconic club. There would still be big pressure, 60-odd thousand fans every other week, and a worldwide fan base. That article was by Aidan Smith. Recorded from the Herald on the 5th of May 2022, from the sports section. Scotland's Women's World Cup qualifier against Ukraine moved to Poland on June date, by Alan Campbell. Scotland's Women's World Cup qualifier against Ukraine will now be played in Poland on June 24th. It was originally scheduled for Lviv last month. Prior to the invasion of their country, a majority of the Ukraine squad played their football with domestic clubs, most notably in Kyiv, with the country's top two teams, Zhytomyr 1 and Zhytomyr 2. Now they are scattered at clubs all over Europe, with the exception of 36-year-old goalkeeper Irina Sonina and 17-year-old striker Aina Haldichenko. Former Barcelona head coach Luis Cortes, who is now in charge of the Ukraine women's team, has helped facilitate loan moves to other countries. 6 players are in Turkey and 5 in Spain. The Stadion Majeska in Chesko will now be the venue for the game, which could see Scotland almost cross the line for the World Cup playoffs. Spain have already won Group B, with Scotland second, a point ahead of Hungary and 6 clear of Ukraine, who have played 2 games less. A Scotland win in Poland would eliminate Ukraine and effectively Hungary, also ahead of the final group game against the Faroe Islands in September. The Hungarians play Ukraine, also in Chechno, on June 28th, and then have an away tie against Spain in September. Scotland head coach Pedro Martinez Loza was not available to comment on the Ukraine venue switch. That article was by Alan Campbell.
The Herald Scotland, Thursday, 5th of May 2022. Voices. Loch Ness Monster. Nessie myth really does say something very political about Scotland. By Neil Mackay, writer-at-large. Culturally, Scotland is becoming a very thin-skinned and nervous country. The mere act these days of academics asking questions, which is, after all, what we pay them to do, is increasingly taken as signs and omens of hyper-politicalisation underway in education. This ridiculous kerfuffle of late about the Loch Ness Monster apparently being used to indoctrinate children into an anti-British fervour is an exemplar. Here is the background. Education Scotland prepared guidance for social studies teachers on a cinema course entitled How Others See Us in Film. Essentially, it explores 3 movies, Brigadoon, Loch Ness and the Da Vinci Code, and asks what each says about Scottish identity. Mostly, the guidance looks at the dotish tartanisation of Scottish culture as seen from overseas, something which we must take some responsibility for ourselves, given we promote Caledonian kitsch rapaciously through our tourist industry. Some folk reach for the smelling salts, however, over a few sentences extracted from this 16-page guide, such as, the very idea of a prehistoric monster in a loch affirms the stereotypical idea that Scotland, by contrast to England, is a rural wilderness, perhaps one bypassed by progress. This is a very British idea of Scotland, propagated previously by upper-class tourists. The guide adds, however, that the way science was used to investigate Nessie represents Scotland as a fully integrated part of the modern British state. Nessie's role as a tourist magnet from the 1930s reveals a lot about Scotland's position within the Union, namely that the myth encouraged travel to remote parts of Scotland by English visitors, which in turn created a sense of unified national community. So the notion this optional lesson indoctrinated some sense of English domination is just hyperventilating fantasy. The problem, however, is that such stupid commentary means much more interesting discussions about Nessie get overlooked, because the monster does indeed say some interesting things about Scotland, as do all national myths. That's why legends exist. They perpetuate stereotypes both by and about nations. They're metaphors, like it or not, for who we are and how people see us. Nessie, as the social studies guide implies, really does reflect the sense that Scotland is a wild place. However, that image isn't just a fabrication by British aristocrats. It's a fabrication by ourselves as well. Scotland rightly reveals in its rugged beauty. We all enjoy our myths of monsters and kelpies. We know to employ a tired phrase, that it others us, by which I mean it makes us different. This isn't the othering of words like jock, intended as an insult. It's othering done by ourselves to make us distinct. We also cannot moan about the fact that one of our greatest national myths has come to define us in the eyes of others. Ask any tourist to name 5 things about Scotland, and you're guaranteed to hear Nessie. We do the same ourselves to other nations. Try visiting Transylvania and not thinking of vampires, replete with an implicit fear of the other. It's impossible, because the connection is part of our global consciousness. We even do it to England. Take London's East End. Most folk will probably think of Cockneys, Jack the Ripper, jellied eels, knees up Mother Brown, and all that twee nonsense which has no connection to the life of the modern East End. And yet the East End itself plays up those tropes as that's what visitors want. Jack the Ripper tours, pints and sing-alongs in phony East End pubs, selfies with some pearly queen. Although the Arthurian myth is of Welsh and Celtic origin, it's become closely identified with England, primarily because it was worked over by Norman poets trying to forge an identity myth for a newly conquered kingdom, using conventions of medieval chivalry as the delivery mechanism. As a result, what does Arthur now say about England? It plays to stereotypes of social hierarchy and aristocracy, of a society more stratified than in Scotland, Ireland or Wales. Is there truth in that? That's for England to decide. I am originally from Northern Ireland, and in some twisted way, the national symbol of Ulster, the bloody red hand, speaks deeply both to our vision of ourselves and the vision which others have of us. One of the myths associated with the red hand is this. The High King has died and his 2 sons must swim across Loch Ness to decide who will wear the crown. Whoever reaches the far shore wins. One brother, knowing he's losing, hacks off his own hand and throws it, bloody, onto the shore so he can claim the victory. The story sums up the view which Ulster people have of ourselves, that we never quit, and the view others have of us, that we're a violent lot who cut off our nose to spite our face. Like the Scots, there's no such thing as an average Ulster person. How can any identity sum up a Nobel laureate like Seamus Heaney and a killer from the Shankill Butchers? But each nation lives with the stereotype it creates and then has mirrored back by others. There's more to Nessie, though, than simply a symbol of rugged romantic Scotland. The myth was forged when St Columba, an Ulster monk, coincidentally, brought Christianity to Scotland. Columba, like all early missionaries, was a grand propagandist, and he needed to show the heathen Picts he had powers just as strong as their pagan magic. So a story was cooked up when the saint pacified the beast. Nessie is, at its root, a hangover from Scotland's pagan past. Modernity did come slow to the Highlands in centuries past. Nessie carries something of that within the myth. Scotland did leap shamelessly onto tatty tourism in the early 20th century. Nessie symbolises that too. And perhaps, lying beneath the surface of the myth, subconsciously, Nessie also represents something rather threatening, the danger Scotland knows it can possess to the once cosy consensus of union, and the unease England feels about Scotland, a sense that England doesn't quite fully understand Scotland, can't really see Scotland properly, like the shiver on the surface of a loch, as something unknown passes beneath. This article was written by Neil Mackay.
Herald Scotland recorded on Thursday 5th of May 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Literature, what new books to read this week by Herald Magazine. Fiction, Young Mungo, Douglas Stewart, Picador, £16.99, ebook £8.99. Douglas Stewart set the bar high with his Booker-winning debut Shuggie Bain, and his second novel Young Mungo lives up to expectations. It's a heart-wrenching tale of 15-year-old Protestant Mungo's tender first relationship with Catholic James in a brutally homophobic and sectarian world set in Glasgow's housing schemes. Readers of Shuggie Bain will be familiar with many of the themes, including troubled family dynamics and a neglectful alcoholic mother who sends Mungo on a fishing trip with two strange men, which descends into horror. The vivid characterisation and masterful storytelling transport you to below the city's poverty line, where young people face extreme violence and few prospects. The gritty subject matter is sometimes hard to read, but the story is also hopeful and the writing lyrical. A deeply moving novel that leaves a lasting impression. 10 out of 10. Firstborn, Will Dean, Hodder and Stoughton, £16.99, ebook £7.99. Molly and Katie are identical twins whose lives couldn't be more different. Molly never leaves her North London comfort zone, with her outgoing sister seeking exciting adventures in New York. A phone call brings horrifying news that Katie has been found dead, sparking an unwanted journey into the unknown to uncover what has happened. The plot thickens with every chapter as Molly tries to piece together who murdered her twin with the help of a detective and a mysterious private investigator. Suspicion veers between a former boyfriend and an ex-tutor, leading to a jaw-dropping development that will leave readers in total shock. The pace quickens as Will Dean expertly steers readers through the streets of New York in a race between the police and Molly to find the killer. The story is truly original, with one of those brilliant endings only a great thriller writer can dream up. 8 out of 10. One Day I Shall Astonish the World, Nina Stibbe, Viking, priced £14.99, ebook £9.99. Nina Stibbe's quirky tale of long-time frenemies Susan and Norma provides a much-needed dose of comic relief in these unrelentingly grim times. Starting from their first meeting in their early 20s, when Susan takes a job in Norma's parents' haberdashery shop, it follows the pair through 30 years dotted with marriages, kids, career quandaries, vandalised caravans, outdoor sex and a landslide. While Norma climbs the ladder of academia, Susan is left to deal with an awkward daughter, an unrequited crush on her boss, brackets, who happens to be married to Norma, close brackets, and a golf-obsessed husband who wants to live forever. As the years go by and the unspoken rivalries between the women deepen, Susan is left wondering whether they're really friends at all. It all makes for a deeply entertaining novel, overlaying a deeper narrative about the real meaning of friendship. 8 out of 10. Non-fiction, An Accidental Icon, Norman Scott, Hodder and Stoughton, £22, ebook £10.99. As the man at the centre of the Jeremy Thorpe affair, one of the most explosive political scandals of the 70s, Norman Scott's account of the whole sordid debacle is expected to be dramatic. But it seems that virtually every episode of the former stable hand and male model's life has been filled with some sort of disaster: abuse by his mother, sexual mismatches, falling outs with employers, homelessness, estrangement from his son, mistreatment and misjudgment. His path seemingly has been a cacophony of crises. All this is woven around his account of his alleged affair with MP Jeremy Thorpe, his refusal to be silenced and the resulting fallout from the scandal. Scott is now 82, living a quiet life in Dartmoor, so one wonders why he should want to rake up all the old, upsetting coals of his life, which he recalls with meticulous detail. Unlike Midas, it's nothing Scott touched turned to gold, but this juicy life story may change all that. 6 out of 10. Children's book, Gaia, Goddess of Earth, Imogen Greenberg, Bloomsbury Children's Books, £14.99. Told in a fun and easy-to-follow comic book format, this is the story of Gaia, the ancient Greek goddess who created the earth. Similar to Horrible Histories, it's all about making learning fun and accessible. There are plenty of characters you'll recognise, like Zeus and Hercules, as well as some of the lesser-known gods, who have equally interesting stories to tell as they battle for control of the earth. By nature, Greek mythology can be quite confusing, so younger readers might occasionally get lost. However, the Greenberg sisters have ultimately created a book that's colourful and fun, with a heartwarming message about protecting the earth. 7 out of 10. By Herald magazine.
The Herald, Friday, the 6th of May 2022. News. Alaba boss defeated as Salmon's party set for fresh humiliation. This article is by Tom Gordon. The General Secretary of Alex Salmon's Alaba party has failed to get re-elected. Chris McElhenney, the former SNP group leader on Inverclyde Council, lost his seat after being deserted by local voters. He had been seen as the best prospect for the pro-independence Alaba party in the election. However, he picked up just 126 of the 4,774 first preference votes in the Inverclyde West ward, the second lowest of the 7 candidates standing. A former contender to be deputy leader of the SNP, he was beaten by Labour's Martin McCluskey, the SNP's Sandra Reynolds, and independent Lynn Quinn in the 3-member ward. Mr McElhenney's father Jim, another SNP defector to Alaba, also failed to get re-elected under his new banner in Inverclyde Central. Mr McElhenney Sr. polled just 108 of the 2,826 first preference votes, the lowest of the 6 candidates standing in the ward. Last month, Mr Salmond, who did not stand himself in the election because he is pursuing TV work in London, said his party was on the cusp of a historic electoral breakthrough. The election of the first councillors under the Alaba banner will make a difference to the future of Scotland, he said. However, it proved not to be, leaving the former First Minister humiliated. Another prominent Alaba hopeful, Councillor Brian Topping in Aberdeenshire, also failed to get re-elected. At the 2021 Holyrood election, Alaba failed to get any MSPs via the regional list system, even though it needed just 5 or 6% of the vote to do so. Polling was at 1.7% nationwide. The electoral arithmetic for the council elections was even harder for it to overcome, with the party needing 20% plus 1 to get a councillor elected in a 4-member ward and 25% plus 1 in a 3-member ward. In a statement, Mr McElhenney said, "I have been an elected representative of the people for the majority of my adult life. Such was the young age I was when first elected. I am very proud of the achievements I've been able to help my community achieve during this time. I am very proud of our Alaba candidates in Inverclyde, particularly my father. We may not have made the breakthrough that we had hoped for, but I am confident that for as long as Scotland is handcuffed to the calamities of Westminster, and Alaba are the only party setting out a plan and positive vision for the necessity for Scotland's independence as an immediate priority, then there will be a much-needed space for Alaba Party in the political sphere of Scottish politics. The reason I got into Scottish politics was to restore my country's independence, and that is a job that is not yet complete. So tremble, false wigs, in the midst of your glee. You've not seen the last of my bonnet and me." This article is by Tom Gordon. The Herald, Friday the 6th of May 2022. News. Jim Sillars lodges police complaint over Minister's ferry fiasco's missing documents. This article is by Martin Williams. Ex-SNP Deputy Leader Jim Sillars has lodged a police complaint calling for an investigation into the missing documents over Scotland's ferry fiasco, raising questions about misconduct in public office. The nationalist veteran has made a complaint as Scottish Government ministers were accused of breaking the law through a lack of transparency over the ferry fiasco, which has seen 2 new Lifeline vessels delayed by over 5 years and with costs spiralling to £250,000. Public finance auditors expressed frustration over a lack of documentary evidence around why ministers were happy to accept the risks of proceeding with awarding the controversial £97 million order to Jim McCall-led Ferguson Marine without mandatory refund guarantees from the shipbuilder. Now Mr Sillars has demanded the police investigate the missing documentation surrounding why ministers went ahead with granting the contract despite the concerns raised by the government's ferry procurement body, Caledonian Maritime Assets Limited, CMAL, over the lack of financial guarantees that placed them at risk. Scottish Parliament Public Audit Committee convener Richard Leonard said correspondence between officials in the Scottish Government and at CMAL suggested there was a ministerial direction but that it had not been appropriately recorded. And he suggested that the transparency failure was a breach of the Public Finance and Accountability Act. A ministerial direction or written authority is a formal edict from ministers to proceed with a spending proposal despite objections from civil servants. Mr. Sillars said there are 3 acts of the Scottish Parliament which place a solemn duty on accountable officials and ministers to minute key decisions and to safely store the documents recording who was there, the subject matter, and the decisions taken. It is inconceivable that this was not done by a professional civil service and ministers with long service in government. Indeed, the First Minister confirms that there was a written record taken. Where are the documents? Who was responsible for placing them in the records? Who failed to do so? Did they fail to do so? Were they destroyed? Why, among all the documents relevant to this fiasco, are these ones, the key ones, about who made the contract decision, not to be found? These are the questions that should fall now to the police to find the answers, given that in Scots common law, the crime of misconduct in public office is there to protect the public interest when those in a public administration fail disastrously to fulfil their duties. I have made the complaint to Police Scotland and not to the Crown Office because, with all due respect to the new Lord Advocate, I remain unconvinced that the impartiality required when anything relates to the Scottish Government remains unproven. The auditor's examination of the issues said there was no documented evidence to confirm why Scottish ministers were willing to accept the risks of awarding the contract despite the concerns. The Act alone has cost the taxpayer £80 million. The first ship was meant to enter service on the Arran route in the summer of 2018, but is not expected to be ready until next year at the earliest, 5 years late. Hull 802, destined for an Outer Hebrides route, has gone the same way. The latest estimated cost for both ships is at least £250 million off an original fixed contract price of £97 million. SNP Finance Minister Ivan McKee has previously dismissed claims that there could be a breach of Ministerial Code of Conduct over record-keeping failures after Audit Scotland said there was not a proper record over the controversial ferry contract award. He said that there were already 200 documents in the public domain about the process the Scottish Government went through and that ministers were committed to open government and values and encourages accountability. But Mr. Sillars said, like most people who value probity and effectiveness in governance, I have watched appalled as the Calmac Ferries fiasco has unfolded, a fiasco compounded by missing documents that would, if available, hold those responsible to account. I have also watched MSPs and MPs demand a public inquiry, which all knew the Scottish Government would not concede. They get high marks for political point scoring, but the public, that is, the people who have paid the extortionate bills, are still in the dark, and the West Coast communities who have suffered economic and social disruption have no one whom they can identify to seek recompense from. This article is by Martin Williams.
From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the sports section. Ange Postecoglou lands 5th Manager of the Month award as Celtic close in Premiership crown. By Aidan Smith. Celtic manager Ange Postecoglou has been named as the Scottish Premiership Glens Manager of the Month for April, as his side moves closer to claiming the season 21-22 Premiership title. Postecoglou's side remained in top spot with another unbeaten run of league results during April, which included a 7-0 win over St Johnstone at Celtic Park, as well as away victories against Ross County and Rangers, ahead of the weekend draw with their closest rivals, which maintained their 6-point gap at the top of the table. The Australian manager has now picked up 5 of those accolades this season, having been named as Glenn's Premiership Manager of the Month for October and securing a clean sweep of awards so far this year with the January, February, March and now April awards. Postecoglou said, "Of course it's really pleasing that we as a group are recognised in this way again, and it shows we've been working well. April was a really positive month for us in the league, with 3 huge wins and some great performances leading to our position at the top of the league. Yet again, my players and my backroom guys collectively have put in a tremendous amount of work in, and we have reaped the rewards we have deserved. We now look ahead to the remaining league matches and know we will need to continue these levels to get where we want to be." Colin Matthews, CEO of Glenn's owner, the Loch Lomond Group, said, "The fact that Ange Postecoglou has picked up each of the Glenn's monthly awards we've presented in 2022 is a testament to his side's form since the beginning of this year, and I'm sure Ange and his coaching staff will be delighted to be going into the weekend fixtures in the knowledge they are so close to reclaiming the league title. A run of consecutive monthly awards like this is rare in this competition, but it does highlight the dominant run of form Celtic are having at the moment, as well as the continued positive impact Ange Postecoglou and his staff around him are having at Celtic Park. My congratulations to Ange and his team for another superb set of results in April." And that was an article by Aidan Smith. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the sports section, Liam Morrison explains why he has no regrets over leaving Celtic for Bayern Munich. Exclusive by Stefan Biankowski. Liam Morrison has no regrets over leaving Celtic for Bayern Munich because the hands-on coaching taught to him by World Cup winner Miroslav Klose was exactly what he was hoping to learn when he made the move to Germany. After arriving in the Bavarian capital in 2019, Morrison was placed in Bayern's under-17 team, where he was managed by Klose and former Argentina international Martin de Michelis, which was ultimately what convinced the young defender to make the move abroad in the first place. I looked at the under-17 coaching staff and they had Miroslav Klose, the World Cup all-time top goal scorer, and Martin de Michelis, who has played in World Cup finals and played for Manchester City, said Morrison. So I just took one look at that and thought I could learn so much from those guys, especially de Michelis, who used to play in my position. However, while Morrison may have been expecting lectures on winning trophies or tactical lessons on working under some of the best managers of the modern era, he instead got a black eye in training, which has proved to be just as valuable. I did have a good relationship with Miroslav for the games I played in the under-17s, recalls Morrison, before revealing that the former Werder Bremen, Bayern and Lazio striker often took part in training. I remember thinking, this guy's been retired for I don't know how many years, he'll just walk about. But he was the complete opposite, said Morrison with a laugh, standing on my toes, elbowing me in the face when he's going up for headers. And I didn't want to tackle him because he's my coach, and I didn't want to annoy him or anything. It was 2 years ago when I was with the under-17s, but he definitely still had it. He was just good at everything. And that report was by Stefan Biankowski. From the Glasgow Times, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the sports section, Rangers warned over key Frankfurt duo ahead of Europa League final showdown, by Darren Johnson. Former West Ham and St Mirren defender Anton Ferdinand has told Rangers they will have to keep Eintracht Frankfurt pair Angus Knuth and Diaja Kamada quiet if they are to lift the Europa League trophy. Ferdinand was gutted that the Hammers fell short at the semi-final stage in a 3-1 aggregate loss to the Germans. But the 37-year-old is hoping Rangers can go all the way and lift the silverware after overcoming RB Leipzig. Ferdinand was particularly impressed by on-loan Borussia Dortmund wingback Knuth and midfielder Kamada over the two legs. He said, "There are some players to watch out for. The right wingback Knuth is a fantastic player. He was fantastic over both legs. Kamada, the Japanese playmaker, is another one that Rangers will have to look at and keep quiet, but that togetherness that Rangers have and fan base they have can see this through. In the final, it does not matter who is playing well at the time. In the final, it's about who turns up on the day, and as we've seen against German teams this season, Rangers have turned up every single time. As someone who is British, I would like to see Rangers win the Europa League. And that article was by Darren Johnson. From the Herald Scotland, Friday the 6th of May 2022, from the sports section, Stephen Gerrard admits Rangers' pride as Aston Villa boss salutes Ibrox club during press conference, by Aidan Smith. Stephen Gerrard has saluted Rangers for their Europa League heroics against RB Leipzig last night. The Light Blues booked a spot in the final of the competition after coming from behind in the first leg. Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's side will now face Frankfurt in the final of the competition in Seville, and Gerrard admitted great pride in his former team. Speaking to Sky Sports, he said, "What a night, what a game and what an atmosphere for everyone connected to the club. Really proud of everyone connected to Rangers. It was a fantastic game to watch and listen. It's thoroughly deserved. The journey they've been on, Gio, the boys and everyone connected to the club deserve a lot of credit. There's one step to go. I'll be supporting from afar, but I wish them well." And that article was by Aidan Smith.
Herald Scotland recorded on Friday 6th of May 2022. Arts and Entertainments. Emma Christie, The Joys of Val de Bois in the Spanish Pyrenees, by Susan Swarbrick, columnist and senior features writer. Emma Christie, author. Where is it? The Val de Bois in the foothills of the Spanish Pyrenees are around 150 miles north of Barcelona. Why do you go there? For me, this valley has everything: nature, culture, gastronomy, and a great sense of peace that never wavers. I love to hike, and the valley touches one of the most spectacular areas of the Spanish Pyrenees, all sparkling lakes and dramatic peaks and roaring waterfalls and big skies. It's hugely inspiring to walk here. There's also a brilliant ski resort in the valley and fantastic mountain lodges offering authentic Catalan food. But what makes it even more special is the cultural heritage. There are 9 tiny churches dotting the valley, dating from the 11th and 12th centuries. I studied medieval history at Aberdeen University and continue to be fascinated by the architecture and art from that period. A highlight is the Church of San Clement de Tol, home to a masterpiece of European Romanesque art, the Pantocrator fresco. The original was removed for safekeeping to a Barcelona museum, but now the church is a totally brilliant digital recreation of the fresco. They use a technique called video mapping to show how the murals were painted, stroke by stroke. It's quite remarkable to watch. I also come here for work sometimes. I lead small groups through the valley when I work as a freelance tour guide with US educational travel company Road Scholar. How often do you go? 2 or 3 times a year. How did you discover it? I remember reading about the valley and its churches when I first moved to Spain in 2002 and was fascinated, but I didn't make it there until 2017. My girlfriend and I had just bought a camper van and we went to the Val de Bois on one of our first trips. I fell instantly in love. What's your favourite memory? I love taking groups to the San Clement Church in Tol. The last thing they expect inside a 900-year-old church is a spectacular digital show, so there are always a few gasps when it starts. Who do you take? My girlfriend or small tour groups? What do you take? Camper van, camera, hiking boots, skis and a big appetite. What do you leave behind? My laptop. It's not a place for working. Sum it up in 5 words. Wild, inspiring, surprising, endlessly beautiful. What other travel spot is on your wish list? Meteora in Greece. It is a rocky mountain area with spectacular formations and monasteries built in precipitous peaks. Emma Christie's first novel, The Silent Daughter, was shortlisted for the McIlvanney Prize for Scottish Crime Book of the Year 2021. Her second novel, Find Her First, is out now. Welbeck, £8.99. She will appear at the I Write Book Festival, Mitchell Library, Glasgow on May 12 at 8 p.m, alongside Marion Todd and Jonathan Whitelaw of the Caledonian Crime Collective. Tickets cost £10. Visit glasgowlife.org.uk. By Susan Swarbrick.
From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of May 2022, from the sports section, Goldser's inspiring Rangers Europa League speech as he makes "Haven't got a team like us" statement, by David Irvin, sports writer. Connor Goldson delivered an inspiring speech to his teammates just seconds before they began warming up for the Europa League semi-final match against RB Leipzig. Rangers had to come back from a 1-goal deficit to make it to the final of the European competition after a late loss in Germany. But Giovanni van Bronckhorst's side turned in an excellent performance in front of a packed Ibrox to advance after winning 3-1 in Glasgow. And before the Rangers player went out to the warm-up for the match, Golson barked a message to pump up his teammates. Footage captured on the Rangers TV inside the Ibrox video from the Euro triumph revealed Golson's words ahead of the match. The defender shouted, "I don't care who they are, what their name is, what they're worth. They haven't got a team like us. Come on, no respect. Let's go." Goals from James Tavernier, Glenn Kamara and John Lundstrom were enough to overcome the first leg loss and Christopher Nkunku's strike in Glasgow. It sets up a final against Eintracht Frankfurt in Seville later this month. After today's win over Dundee United, Van Bronckhorst revealed he's holding out hope that Kemar Roofe will return from fitness to feature. He said, Roofe, is going to work hard to make it. Of course, he didn't make it for last Thursday's game. That means he's got 2 weeks to prepare more. All he wants is to be available for those games, so he will push himself. My medical staff will do everything possible to get him fit. We have to wait and see how it goes, but the intentions are to have him fit. And that report was by David Irvin. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of May 2022, from the sports section, Max Verstappen survives late Charles Leclerc onslaught to win Miami Grand Prix. And this article is unattributed. Max Verstappen survived a late onslaught from Charles Leclerc to win Formula One's inaugural Miami Grand Prix. The world champion started third, but raced past Carlos Sainz at the opening bend before taking Leclerc and the other Ferrari on lap 9. A 10-lap shootout following a safety car period provided a dramatic end, but Verstappen held his nerve. Leclerc took the runner-up spot, with Sainz completing the podium. Sergio Perez took 4th ahead of George Russell. Lewis Hamilton started 6th and finished in the same position after he was usurped by a freshly shot Russell with 9 laps to run. "Strategy has not been kind to me, man," he said over the radio. Russell has now finished ahead of Hamilton at every race bar one, with the 7-time world champion 68 points behind Leclerc after just 5 rounds. The stars of sport and showbiz flocked to Florida for F1's first race at the Hard Rock Stadium, 50 miles north of downtown Miami. NBA great Michael Jordan, Grand Slam champions Serena and Venus Williams, former England captain David Beckham, Hollywood's Matt Damon, and pop star Pharrell Williams led the cast in a celebrity-fueled and manic pre-race grid. But when the lights flicked from red to green, the initial action on track provided less entertainment. Hamilton has won 6 times and sealed 2 of his 7 titles in the land of the free, but those triumphs will feel like a distant memory for Britain's record-breaking star. Hamilton's Mercedes is no longer F1's tour de force, and by lap 20, he was already half a second behind Verstappen. Hamilton's getaway was strong, drawing alongside former teammate Valtteri Bottas in the short run to the opening chicane. But Hamilton locked up, losing a spot to Pierre Gasly before Fernando Alonso's front right wheel made contact with Hamilton's left rear at the opening chicane. "I've been hit from behind," said Hamilton. His race engineer, Peter Boynton, replied, "I don't think we have suffered any damage." Hamilton fought his way back past Alonso on lap 3 to move up to 7th. 3 laps later, he roared past Gasly for 6th, a dozen seconds behind Leclerc. Up front, the lead changed hands at the start of lap 9 when Verstappen drew alongside Leclerc in the pit straight before roaring past his championship rival. The race plateaued before suddenly coming to life with 16 laps left when Lando Norris and Gasly collided. Gasly ran wide at turn 8 and Norris sensed an opportunity in their duel for 13th, but the pair behind wheels with the young Briton sent into a high-speed pirouette as his right rear tyre fell off his McLaren. Out came the safety car, with Russell, who had yet to bid for a new rubber, able to take effectively a free stop. That promoted him to 7th, a place behind Hamilton, who was on 24-lap-old rubber when the safety car came in. Bottas ran wide at turn 8, enabling Hamilton to move up one spot, but he could not keep Russell, on fresh tyres, behind. The two Mercedes fought for position, but Russell made the move to deal Hamilton another blow in a season proving unforgettable for the grid's most decorated driver. Bottas finished 7th, with double world champion Alonso 8th. Mick Schumacher was denied his first points in F1 following a late collision with Sebastian Vettel. It was very hard physically, but I'm incredibly happy with winning in Miami, said Verstappen, following his third victory of the campaign. Leclerc said, "We've struggled with the tyres in the first stint, and it made our race difficult. I thought I could get Max at one point, but he was too quick. It has been a tight with Max since the beginning of the season, and that has been great to see." And that article was unattributed. From the Herald Scotland, Monday the 9th of May 2022, from the Voices section. Mark Smith, The Chaos at Jordan Hill and the Lesson We Can Learn From It, by feature writer Mark Smith. I can't really remember what I did on my last day at school, but I was a bit of a swot to be honest, so I probably read a book in the library, or picked up litter in the playground. I certainly didn't throw eggs, or set off flares, or scatter pornographic images around the place. But Toto, we're not in the 1980s anymore. The problem in 2022 is that behaviour in schools that often starts out as last day larks is increasingly turning into genuine trouble. In my day, I said I'd never use that phrase when I got old, but here we are now. The last term you brought in games, kerplunk, buckaroo, operation, and if it was your last day ever, maybe you got your friends to sign a t-shirt or something. It was all fairly benign. Not anymore. You may, for example, have heard the story about the letters that Alison Reid, head teacher of a West Hill Academy in Aberdeenshire, sent to the parents of her 4th, 5th and 6th year pupils. In it, she warned she would contact police and possibly future employers if the pupils engaged in disruptive behaviour on her last day. It was pretty heavy duty stuff. You may also have read last week about similar shenanigans at Jordan Hill School in Glasgow. A group of around 50 6-year pupils threw eggs, set off flares, displayed pornographic images and smoked and drank alcohol. When challenged by staff, bottles were smashed and the group continued to behave in a disruptive way. In the end, the police were called. This is not unusual. I was speaking to one former head teacher the other day who told me that the behaviour of pupils on their last day can often get out of hand. She herself was forced to intervene when pupils at her school started throwing flour around. In Jordan Hill's case, it was beans, which were tossed around one of the school walkways. Why is it always food? The wider point here is that the last day misbehaviour by pupils is, I'm afraid, a sign of a deeper problem. The teachers I know say absolutely no one has an issue with pupils letting off steam when they finish school. Indeed, teachers say they're keen to show that they have a sense of humour too, and, as long as it's good natures, they will happily join in the fun. However, misbehaviour on the final day of school is not an isolated issue. In fact, it's an extreme version of behaviour that schools are barely keeping a lid on during the rest of term. I've been speaking to Carol Ford, a former head of Kilmarnock, a former president of School Leaders Council, and now a member of Commission for School Reform, and she doesn't hang back on her diagnosis. Discipline in Scottish schools is deteriorating sharply, she said. Part of the problem, says Ms Ford, has been the effects of the pandemic, although the various lockdowns have only accelerated an issue that already existed beforehand. Pupils constantly talk to each other during lessons, she said, which can make the teacher's job almost impossible. Ms Ford supervises student teachers and is hearing and seeing staff all the time, and what they tell her is they're worn out by the behaviour and morale through the floor. Just one child talking all the time can stop a lesson, so try multiplying that by 100 or 1,000 or more every day and you see the problem. Ms Ford believes the issue can be fixed, although she's not necessarily a fan of extreme measures. She says, for example, that threatening to call in the police, as the head teacher at West Hill did, is not necessarily a sensible strategy. Instead, she says, what you need are sanctions that the people know will operate and that the school will impose when they need to. There's another problem, however, which is the lack of support from parents. At the risk of using the phrase "in my day" again, there was a time when trouble with teacher automatically meant trouble with mum and dad, but that situation no longer applies. Carol Ford says, for example, that when they told their son or daughter is talking in class and being disruptive, the response from the parents is often, well, they're just talking. The problem, she says, is that many parents simply no longer accept the school's decision about when a line has been crossed. No one, of course, would expect parents to automatically accept every school decision, and they should reserve the right to appeal when they think a school has been too harsh or made the wrong call. But teachers are now making decisions in the shadow of constant parental criticism on forums and social media groups, and some teachers say they are now very wary about what they say or do because they know they're going to get a pile on. The answer, it would seem to me, is firm and consistent school management. In the case of Jordan Hill, for example, they were right to cancel the school prom when their sixth formers got out of hand. However, Carol Ford believes that in many cases senior management have become reluctant to enforce sanctions because they feel their pupils have been through a rough 2 years and they don't want to add to their difficulties. Now, it's certainly true that it's been a rough 2 years, but the problem of discipline will only be fixed if everyone with some power and influence is working on the same theory. No mobile phones in class, no talking out of turn, and firm sanctions if the rules are disobeyed, supported by teachers, management and, most importantly of all, parents. Effectively, we need a shift back to parents supporting staff instead of criticising them. I accept that this will not be easy, and that, as I said at the start, this is not the 1980s, which in some ways is a good thing. The atmosphere at my school was strict and discipline was tight, but it also lacked pretty much any of the empathy, understanding and sympathy that pupils have happily learned to expect now. In other words, I would not advocate a return to the regime I experienced, a regime that was enforced by the belt and occasionally whatever object the teacher could get his hands on. The bigger point is that discipline can be firm without being violent. Pupils do not randomly misbehave on their last day. Little angels do not suddenly start throwing beans and flour about the place. Instead, they exhibit an extreme form of behaviour that is a daily part of life in many schools. It is an epidemic of minor indiscipline and, day in, day out, it's seriously damaging to the teachers and ultimately to the pupils as well. That is the lesson of Jordan Hill. That is the lesson of the drinking and the smoking and the beans and the flour lining the corridors of our schools. And that was an opinion piece by Mark Smith. Our columns are a platform for writers to express their opinions. They do not necessarily represent the views of the Herald.
The Herald, Monday the 9th of May 2022. News. BMA leader warns Scotland headed for two-tier healthcare. This article is by Helen McCardle. A top doctor said he would be very nervous if he needed NHS treatment or social care right now, amid spiralling pressures on the system. Dr. Graham Younson described the situation in A&E departments as horrific and said he fears the health service is heading towards a twin-track system where people who can afford to pay will get better care. Dr. Younson, a consultant paediatrician based at the Borders General Hospital, was speaking to the Herald following his final meeting as chair of the BMA's Scottish Consultants Committee. He will step down from the post he has held since 2019 in September, amid a crisis which he says has no end in sight. He said, "The sad truth is that a lot of the things we were warning about in 2019 are still the problems that we face today, but all of these have been magnified by the pandemic and now the attempt to recover. We went into the pandemic with a workforce that was running on empty. Now we're trying to play catch up from a very difficult starting position." Dr. Younson said pensions agency data for Scotland indicates that the number of medics retiring doubled in 2021 compared to 2020, and he fears that the trend is only likely to accelerate unless more is done to tackle a long-running pensions tax issue, which can see senior clinicians penalised with annual bills running into tens of thousands unless they retire early or reduce their working hours. That's something we thought was going to happen, that people would stick it out for 2020 and then retire in 2021. But we're worried that's going to happen again and again, and we'll keep losing staff faster than we can replace them at the bottom, said Dr. Younson. It just makes no sense not to be addressing a very simple problem that is having a disproportionate impact that far exceeds any nominal benefit to the Treasury. We have an ageing workforce and it's driving people out, but the only way we're going to get through the next 5 to 10 years is by retaining every possible member of staff we can. In the Central Belt, where you've got large hospitals and teams of 30, you can smooth it out, but in small hospitals like my own, or in the Highlands, Dumfries and Galloway, Ayrshire, the peripheries, you've got small teams. It's really difficult to recruit, and if you lose that one key consultant, it can be the difference between a viable service and a service that collapses. Dr. Younson said that he also had a very significant worry that there will be an exodus of young doctors to Australia and New Zealand now that the borders have reopened, and where much lower rates of COVID over the past 2 years means treatment backlogs have been minimised. In Scotland, the NHS remobilisation strategy is banking on the creation of a network of dedicated elective hubs capable of delivering an extra 40,000 planned procedures a year by 2025-26. While welcoming the aim, Dr. Younson cautioned that risked destabilising acute care without a substantial increase in frontline staff. The Scottish Government has set a target to recruit 1,500 new clinical and non-clinical staff for the National Treatment Centres by 2026. The worry is that this is going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, said Dr. Younson. Without a fundamental increase in the number of people we've got, all you're going to do is take people who are working in very pressurised district generals and move them into the hubs that offer a better working life. He stressed that hospitals are not overwhelmed by the total number of A&D attendances or admissions, which both remain below pre-pandemic levels, but because too many beds are being occupied by patients well enough to leave. Dr. Younson said, the whole system is clogged up because there's no space in social care, so the whole hospital is full of people who are delayed discharge, which means there's no beds for the acutely unwell people who then end up backed up in A&E, which in turn means that ambulances can't unload, so then there's no ambulances to respond to the emergencies in the community. The whole system is ground to a halt, and every day you're swapping risks. The risks of someone being looked after in an A&E department when that's not the right place for them, versus the risk of moving them to an overstretched ward, versus the risk of discharging a patient sooner than they should be going home. These are the pressures we're seeing day to day, but the impact of that is that planned care is being kicked into the long grass, and if you're on an elective orthopaedic waiting list, you're essentially going nowhere. He added, I would be very nervous if I were someone needing health and social care right now, because the whole concept that the NHS will be there for you at the point of need is a bit shaky. It does feel like we're moving into a very two-tier system where if you can afford to pay, you're probably going to get a better service. Be that paying for your own social care because the council-run services aren't there, or because you need an elective procedure and you end up paying for it because otherwise you'll be waiting 4 years. That's not the way it should be, but unfortunately, I think that we're going to end up with a twin-track system for quite some time. The Scottish Government has stressed that NHS Scotland's workforce is at record levels and that it has ploughed significant additional funding into social care, including £62 million to enhance care at home capacity, £48 million to increase the hourly rate of pay, £40 million to provide interim care arrangements, and £20 million to enhance multidisciplinary teams. Funding is also being used to rapidly scale up hospital-at-home services. This article is by Helen McArdle. The Herald, Monday the 9th of May 2022. News. Nicola Sturgeon fails to set out Indie Ref 2 bill timetable despite growing sense UK failing. This article is by David Ball. Nicola Sturgeon has been unable to set out a timetable for a referendum bill on independence to be published despite insisting there is a growing sense the UK is not serving the needs of the nations. The First Minister said she is updating the very positive case for Scotland to leave the UK after Sinn Féin won the most seats, 27 out of 90, in last week's Stormont elections in Northern Ireland. This entitles Sinn Féin to have one of its representatives take up the post of First Minister, which would be the first time a non-unionist politician has held Northern Ireland's top post. Meanwhile, local government elections in Scotland saw the SNP emerge again as the winners, with Ms Sturgeon's party securing more seats on councils than any other party, despite being in government for 15 years. While Ms Sturgeon admitted there was different factors at play in the elections in Scotland and Northern Ireland, she claimed it was now obviously the case that there are very big fundamental questions being asked in every part of the UK about UK governance in the years ahead. She added, "I think there's a growing sense that the UK, in its current state, is not serving the needs of Scotland, Wales or Northern Ireland, or perhaps even England appropriately. And I think we will see big changes in the years to come, and I'm convinced one of these changes will be Scottish independence." She congratulated Sinn Féin, which supports a united Ireland, on its success, with Ms Sturgeon saying, "For them to become the largest party in Northern Ireland is, as you know, a development of truly historic proportions." But she also stressed the importance of parties at Stormont coming together, working together, and getting the Northern Irish Executive up and running again. The Scottish First Minister and SNP leader hailed her own party's success in the local elections as astonishing, saying it was really quite something to have such a result after 15 years in power at Holyrood. Ms Sturgeon insisted a mandate for a second independence referendum had been won in the 2021 Scottish Parliament elections, which saw the SNP and the pro-independent Scottish Greens win a majority of seats at Holyrood, with both parties pledging to have a vote on the issue in this parliamentary term. Ms Sturgeon noted that both the SNP and the Greens had increased their share of the vote in last week's council elections, as she said work towards a second referendum would continue. Asked for when a bill for the future independence referendum could be brought before the Scottish Parliament, the First Minister said that she would set that out in due course. Any such legislation, however, is almost certain to face legal challenge from the UK government, who are opposed to the holding of such a vote. Ms Sturgeon also said her government would start to set out white papers for independence in the very near future. It has been almost a decade since the previous independence white paper, which contained more than 700 pages, was published, with the First Minister promising the new paper would be refreshing and put the very positive case for independence. This article is by David Ball.
Recorded from the Herald on the 10th of May 2022. From the sports section, Celtic and Rangers learn Champions League ruling impact with UEFA to award places on Euro performance, by Aidan Smith. UEFA have announced they will scrap their coefficient plan and from 2024 will award 2 Champions League places to countries whose clubs collectively performed best in Europe the previous campaign. An agreement has been reached in Vienna between UEFA and the European Club Association on access to the new look competition. The proposal to award 2 places in the new 36 league phased based on individual clubs' European performances over 5 years has been scrapped, with critics arguing it created a safety net for failing big clubs and a Super League by default. Instead, 2 places will be awarded to clubs from the countries who performed best in Europe in the previous term. With this in mind, if both Rangers and Celtic had a strong run in the Champions League, the Scottish Premiership could be rewarded with an extra spot. Staying close to home, if applied to next season, England would gain an extra spot. It is also understood the number of matches in the new Look League phase per team will drop to 8, with the initial proposal being 10 matches. Under the approved country coefficient system, England would have secured an extra place in 4 of the last 5 seasons, the exception being performance in the 2019-2020 season, when the places would have gone to Germany and Spain. New proposals were presented to the ECA in Madrid on Monday, and the indications then were that more time would be needed to reach a decision, possibly forcing the decision back until later this month at least. However, a key meeting of UEFA's Club Competitions Committee was delayed on Tuesday morning to allow more time for the final detail to be worked out. UEFA originally approved changes to the format in April last year, but the announcement was totally overshadowed by the formation of the Super League hours earlier. At that point, the format included a leap from the current 6 matches to 10, and the awarding of 2 places to clubs based on historic performance over 5 seasons, provided they had done enough to qualify for one of the other 2 UEFA club competitions. Europe's domestic leagues opposed the increase in matches in the coefficient proposal and still objected even when the proposal was tweaked to avoid clubs leapfrogging rivals who perform better domestically into Europe's premier club competition. That article was by Aidan Smith. Recorded from the Herald on the 10th of May 2022. From the sports section. Celtic on brink of deal for Hammarby's Mohamed Jahiz by James Kearney. Celtic are set to confirm the signing of Hammarby left-back Mohamed Jahiz for a fee of £2 million, according to reports. The 25-year-old has been heavily linked with a move to Parkhead over the last month or so, with manager Ange Postecoglou believed to be keen on bringing in more reinforcements in the full-back positions for next season. Jahiz has no shortage of suitors after impressing in the Swedish top flight, and it appears Celtic have won the race for the Iraqi signature. The Scottish Sun report that a deal to bring the defender to Scotland is close to being completed, adding that Celtic and Hammarby are putting the finishing touches to the overall package. Jahiz, who was born in Sweden but represents Iraq, where his parents are from, at international level, was the subject of interest from Polish outfit Lech Poznan during the January transfer window, but elected to stay at Hammarby. The article was by James Kearney.
And that was this week's The Herald podcast, normally recorded in our studio at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre, currently recorded from our volunteers' homes with the publisher's kind permission. Thanks for listening.